My post covers Ghana and then 9 others around to Senegal and also Burkina Faso and Mali inland. But as everyone knows who's here at Africa Down Under, the Australian relationship, the Australian interests in West Africa are absolutely dominated by mining and the extractive sector. And we've done some recent back of the envelope, or a bit more than that, calculations on what our investment relationship is in West Africa, and we've come up with figures that it's over $10 billion of Australian investment in West Africa, and about another 30 odd billion, did I say million? 10 billion in investment, and over 30 billion in potential future planned investment as well. So around the extractive sector, there's certainly a lot of potential, and Brendan works very hard on that in Austrade, in Accra, to match up Australians with interests in the met sector to tack on to Australian companies and other major mining countries and companies that are operating in our area. I think for Australian companies, we do lead the world in the mining and met sectors, and there are always niches there and always opportunities if you are involved in that sector in a niche market here in Australia. So there is still a lot more to be gained there. While Australians and the world has been mining in Africa and West Africa for a long while, really in West Africa it's been focused in Ghana. There's still huge potential in Burkina, Mali and Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, massive, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and even Senegal. So all the countries have got a lot more resources to be discovered and to be exploited. So the story is not over at all when it comes to extractives in the West Africa. The other sectors are more challenging. As the populations grow, there is going to be obviously a growing interest in taking up education opportunities in the West, and Australia is well regarded, even if people are a bit apprehensive about the distances. We do have a reputation as being friendly and safe, and so that makes it attractive. And these are, because of the populations, it only needs to be a small percentage of the population to be wealthy enough to be significant in numbers of people who are prepared to pay for their education, fee-paying students. And also, I think it's been said over this week that the alumni from our Australia Award Scholarship Program are also very good ambassadors for our universities for fee-paying students, and that's something that we also are very conscious of and also want to exploit that niche as well. West Africa generally is very challenging. You've got to know your country well before you go in there. As Di Fleming said earlier this afternoon to me, she suggests that people go in there as a tourist, check out the country, check out the region first, get a feel for it, and then follow up with your business idea. You need to have a local partner, of course, everyone talks about that, but there's local partners and you've got to make sure you get a good one, because a lot of people will claim that they know something or know a sector or have the connections, but you could be seriously misled there. Another feature of doing business in West Africa, and it's probably common to a lot of places in the world, is that there are, for every question you ask, and this is across a whole range of issues, you'll get several different answers. So ask the same question to many, many people. If you're pursuing an idea, pursuing an angle, don't take the first or even the second answer that you get for it. You've got to really delve in deep, triangulate the responses that you get, double check, triple check, quadruple check, because across every area you'll be getting lots of different answers to the same questions. Ghana also has quite an active GIPC, the Ghana Investment Promotion Commission. That's something that you should also touch base with if you're going into Africa. If you're going into Ghana, they are quite encouraging and they're a pretty reasonable outfit. A caution though on all of this is that while the government talks about being open for business and encouraging investment, there are mixed signals out there. There's at the same time as the GIPC and the government's trying to encourage investment, there is also quite a push for local partners and local content, and that can really slow things up and give off challenges, and also cut into the bottom line if you've got a bit of a free carry of a local partner who's not pulling their weight. That can obviously be pretty difficult for a business trying to set up or even operate, and established businesses in Ghana in the mining sector are coming up against this challenge of now having to come up with a local partner or comply with local content rules that make things quite challenging. Something that's fairly new on the radar to Ghana is the oil and gas sector, which is going through really a bit of a boom. There are, I think, 3 oil fields now that are producing. There's around just under 200,000 barrels a day at the moment, which is reasonable for a small country. And the projections are in the next couple of years, 4 or 5 years, that will go up to 500,000 barrels per day. And by the end of the 2020s, it could be up to 1 million barrels a day, and that's very significant. So while the European and American oil companies, ENI, the Norwegians, Total, they dominate at the moment, or they do dominate, and they will continue to dominate in the oil and gas sector in Ghana. There will be niches for Australian companies there in the production area. And I saw on the slide before that Ghana was listed on the list of countries with the oil and gas sector, but also Senegal. And there we are on a bit of an inside running there with Woodside, on the cusp of making a decision about final investment. And if their investment goes ahead, it's very, very big, very significant for Australia, and very significant for Senegal as well. It'll be their first offshore oil production onshore as well. The first of 2 fields that will come into production, I think by 2022 is their aim. But with that comes a lot of training opportunities as well for Woodside. They are looking seriously at having to train up a workforce in Senegal that has no experience in the offshore oil and gas field. So everything from, I think, welders were mentioned earlier in the context of Kenya. There will be this on steroids for Senegal in the coming years, I would say, if the Woodside investment goes ahead. And highly technical, so Senegal just doesn't have the workforce for this at the moment. And if we can capitalise on that, if Australian suppliers do have a niche there, well, I think there's really exceptional opportunities that await people who get off the mark there quickly and work with Woodside. I'll talk briefly now about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. This has been greeted by a lot of excitement in Africa, and no less in Ghana, which was awarded the hosting of the Secretariat just a couple of weeks ago. So there's a lot of excitement in Ghana on it, as I say, and it's a question really of trying to distinguish the hype and the enthusiasm from the reality. And like a lot of things in Africa, the reality doesn't quite match the ambition, and it's probably in a nutshell, it's not going to be the nirvana or the golden egg that a lot of people would hope. But that said, I think it's the start of a very, very important and very, very good process for Africa. The world is opening up and becoming more connected, and Africa sees this as a great. They've learned the lessons that maybe you could say the UK hasn't learned or has forgotten. Africa is a $3 trillion economy, and so if you look at it in that respect, there's got to be potential there for opening up or knocking down trade barriers there. And the statistics are that something like only 15% of Africa's trade goes outside the continent. Only 15%, that's 85% goes out of the continent, doesn't even cross the next door borders. And this is compared to around the mid-50s for Asia and around mid-60s, 65% for trade within Europe. So you can see the absolute imbalance there, or the contrast there, that intuitively you'd think must lead to great intra-African trade in the future. There's a lot of work still to be done on all the rules that go with a free trade agreement, a free trade area, and some of the rules have been, or the basics have been determined, but a lot still to come. 90% of goods are supposed to be liberalised in the next 5 to 8 years. 90%. 7% of the goods are to be classified as sensitive, and the timeline for them is not 5 to 8 years, it's 10 to 13 years to be liberalised. And then 3% of goods can be exempt from the free trade entirely. So, but with these figures, what hasn't been determined is which goods are classified as which, and so this is where a lot of serious horse trading is going to take place. And with 3% of goods being exempt, that's going to really bring up some interesting arguments and discussions between the African countries. Also, 42% of intra-African trade is in industrial goods. So 42% of the 15% is industrial goods, and that's where I think a lot of the gains are expected to be made. So in industrial goods trading between the countries of Africa. So I guess for the Australian context, the Australian interests here are that, if you set up an industrial factory, whatever, in Ghana or in Africa, you've got potential for this $3 trillion, 1.2 billion people market in the continent. So industrial goods is where there's great potential. 75% of African exports are minerals, are extractives, and so the potential for those to be traded across the continent are much less, because really they need to be refined, they need to be used, and they're going out in bulk to the already industrialised countries around the world. So I think the potential is much more in industrial goods rather than extractives for promoting trade across the continent under the new free trade agreement. So there's trade in goods and services, and then trade in goods, and with that is the issue of free movement of people, and that really, as I understand it, has got a long way to go to be settled, and countries such as Nigeria are going to be fairly sensitive about the negotiations regarding that. Trade in services, significant potential there, but again, a lot to be negotiated. Transport, communications, financial services, tourism, business services, and even something such as air transport, the open skies. We'll have an open skies agreement. What's that going to mean? A lot to be worked through on services, and similarly a lot to be worked through on rules of origin and dispute settlements. So watch that space there. Another significant issue for the governments of Africa to confront with the free trade agreement is the fact that many of them rely on import duties for revenue, and if they're going to be giving away abolishing import duties, that's going to be seriously undermining their revenues, and some people have said that they're going to have a change of mindset to get away from thinking of duties as a form of income tax or a form of revenue, and they've got to move more to corporate tax and income tax to fund their expenditures. So that's going to be another serious challenge. Some good news from our point of view is that I understand that people back in Canberra are looking to provide some training to the African countries in the context of the free trade agreement negotiations, and that's going to be very positive for Africa and positive also for us to demonstrate that we are supporting this move, we are supporting African trade and promoting Australia, our credentials as a country that supports free trade with a lot of expertise in it. So I hope that that's something that we're able to capitalise on, and I'm sure that the Africans will be very pleased to receive that training. So that's it. Thank you.